The riff, man, just that riff at the end just gets me going. Just it hits that note every time, and I'm ready to go. Oh, I'm so excited, guys. I've hit my groove again. I've been doing some more interviews, man. I was a little, I tripped up for a couple, maybe like a month and a half, right? It was a little weird. I didn't have ambition really at first to get back into it. And I think it was just kind of like I was beat up a little bit, but I'm back and I'm feeling so good. And I'm so glad. And I don't know if you know this, Scott, but I have a nickname for you.
Oh,
yeah. How are you tonight, Scotty P?
Scotty P. Oh, excellent. I like it, man. I'm excellent.
Scott
Thank you for having me back. Welcome back yourself. We all love to have you here. We've all missed you.
Thank you.
We all love you, you know.
I appreciate it. And of course, Scott Palmer, of course, is his real name. That was just a little inside. I had, you know, when I refer to you in my mind, at least, because I'm crazy in there. I mean, I'm saying Scotty P for some reason.
I get that a lot. You're not the only person. I think it just kind of flows. It gets the energy across that you're trying to Scotty P.
I think too, like growing up in the 90s, like the Bulls, I feel like Scottie Pippen was Scotty P.
Oh, that might be it. And there's also I get Scotty Do sometimes.
What is that from?
Scotty Don't. Like it's from Austin Powers, right?
Dude.
And then obviously Scotty Doesn't Know is very common.
Scotty doesn't
I just
know.
live with these things, you know. I kind of just own them now. It's awesome. And like I didn't know that was Matt Damon when I was younger.
Yeah, pierced up. He's got like all the piercings in it. But honestly, I don't think I could never reference you as that Scotty, because that Scotty is a little bit desperate and unaware of some things. That's not that's not you, man.
Well, maybe when I was his age, I might have been that desperate and unaware as well.
It takes a real man to say that, because we've all been there, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I love it, man. So I remember the wonderful bookcase that's sitting behind you. I love it. And for those who don't know, and if you haven't watched it, you have to go back, because I had the break-ins on my channel, and every single one of them are awesome. And Scott was one of those guys, and I'm so glad to have him back and to talk about the book that we were speaking about when you came on with the break-ins. It hadn't been out, and it's almost there.
Almost there.
Yeah. And my wife was looking, she pays attention to who I'm speaking with, but I talk with so many people that it kind of all mushes together.
Of course. Yeah.
And I had your cover art pulled up on my computer. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I really like that. Who are you talking with tonight?" And I'm like, that's him right there. She's like, "Oh, I love his cover art." So
that's great. You know, that's Stuart Bache. He is well known first of all, for working with Stephen King, I think most famously. But he is Ryan Cahill's cover artist.
Oh man,
I wanted some iconography, and I mean, when it comes to iconography, those were definitely near the top as far as just looks. So I trusted Stuart, and he's excellent.
He does something, and now that you say that, it makes a lot of sense. It's like I'll always believe in simple but persuasive, or simple but striking will always be superior to those super complex. Not that I don't like those, hidden details, but when I look at Ryan's, or I look at yours, or many others that are just, I don't know, it's right. It's strong like a boulder is the way that my mind goes.
Well, it's one of those things when you're researching your cover and you kind of know your story. This is why I think it's beneficial to wait till you're done your book, to at least until you have an idea of what the final product's going to be, because it's really important, I think, to capture the feeling of your book in the cover. So like some of those ones that are really, like you said, really animated, really done up, they tend to lean more towards that classic epic fantasy feel, and it gives you that Dungeons and Dragons, really picturesque. Where the iconography, I feel, is really popular amongst especially Celtic and Norse driven. I think you'll notice that, and I think it's something to do with those cultures use a lot of art, and they use a lot of iconography, and just their languages are very beautiful in that way, right?
Yeah.
I think really that strong, like a bolder image, like you just said, that really kind of captures that Northern-esque feeling. So
Yes.
I just basically told Stuart with a brief, they call it. I gave him the synopsis, the back synopsis of my book, and that's what he came back with. He was like, it captures all of it's kind of got the spooky horror feeling to it, while giving that epic fantasy feel, right? And
Yes.
it was, I think I heard, I'm trying to think of who it was, and I'm very sorry if it was you, but not you in particular, but anyone watching. Somebody said, and I love this word, they said it was provocative. And I immediately thought of Will Ferrell in that Jay-Z song. It's provocative.
Oh my
I don't remember
gosh.
what movie it's from, but I always hear, and I love that so much, because what more do you want in a cover, right? If it's
What
provocative, you want them to stop and look, and
a
that's
book that says, "Come here."
exactly, yeah.
There's
And I
going to be
don't know
some things in
how
here you need.
he did, like Stuart is incredibly talented at making an image have that power. Just a single image. Like, even like if you want to look at the Stephen King covers that he did, they're very basic, but it's just like you said, they draw you in. And then even Ryan's covers.
Mm.
I mean, of course, there's a dragon, but when it comes down to it, it is just a dragon, right?
Yeah, it is, but in the most magnificent
But it's
way, though, right?
so powerful, so beautiful. Like you said, it draws you in. You want to know more about what's inside of here. It's like a textbook.
It is. It's, and when I look at his covers, very familiar or very similar to yours. It's like I see a dragon, but at first I can honestly say I didn't notice that it was a dragon at first. Not that it took me long to obviously find this out when I looked a little harder at it, but what I see first is just the tone of it, the strikeness or the strikingness or the way it strikes me, and that powerful. You're going to gain a little wisdom through this book.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's incredibly important. It was advice I got very early on to just make sure that cover gives the reader at least a little taste, a little thing. And like people who have read a ton of books, they know, like they understand these things. And obviously publishing houses understand these things. And I think it's just very important to get your book into the right hands. Because there's nothing worse than, well, I mean, there's definitely worse things, but it's not the best. It's not ideal to have your book in the hands of somebody who, like, it attracts them and they're like, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what the cover told me. And you're going to get, I found like that's kind of, you'll see lower reviews just from that. And that's why this whole thing, it's actually kind of funny. You have to put all these pieces together because like getting high reviews isn't just your book is really good. You could have written the best book ever, but you've marketed it in the wrong way. You've put it in the wrong people's hands. And now you're getting 1-star reviews. And it's like, what is happening here?
Well, it go back to that like mom and dad saying is don't judge a book by its cover, but I can't say it's like intensely enough or passionately enough. Like that is absolutely what I do. Like
it is.
It could be the worst book in the world written with terrible grammar, no punctuation, by a guy that's never taken anything related to writing. But if that cover's on point, for some reason in my brain, and I feel like others can relate, it's like that is taken more serious and as a potential read for me based on how awesome that cover is.
Oh, it definitely is. It's your first entry point. Like before they even read a word, that's the first impression. And actually, it's funny when you said like don't judge a book by your cover. That reminds me. So have you heard of Aesop's fables?
I have not.
Ancient fables from like even before the early Greek empires. Like we're talking like really, really old. These are like the rabbit and the hare, or sorry, the hare and the tortoise.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So these kind of little stories, right? So the funny thing is often these fables, they teach you a lesson by telling you to do the opposite, right? So I feel like the wives' tale of don't judge a book by your cover, that's a lesson to authors to absolutely make sure your cover's good because everybody is judging it.
Sure.
But if you said, oh, always judge a book by your cover, that's not as sticky. It doesn't stick around, you know?
Yes.
Adding the negative connotation to it makes it stick in people's heads. Like,
yes, 100%, because we are attracted to what we're not really supposed to be.
You're right.
And then we do things that we're probably told not to do, especially at a younger age.
Yep.
So psychologically, that makes perfect sense, Scott.
And when people see a cover, the first thing that pops in, well, maybe not for everybody, but one of the things that'll pop into their head, don't judge a book by the cover. Oh, I shouldn't be judging this by the cover right now, but I am. I
can't help it.
you know, but it immediately enters the head of almost anybody who, and even like when you're first starting in publishing, you're like, do I need a good cover? Do I need a good cover? Like I never had that thought because I, first of all, knew I judge books by covers. So I was like, but no, if you're having that thought, you absolutely do. And if you're gonna skimp on anything, make sure it's not the cover.
You know, I think that is often what I'm after, and I say it a lot, but it's truly the reason I'm here. It's like I love learning, you know, particularly within the last 5 or 6 years, I've found this passion for literature. So learning about it is just this fun thing for me. And watching authors and getting that kind of those tips, I think out of all of the tips I've heard for those who want to write or publish their own books, self-publish, that is probably the most influential, and what I would take as the most serious as a guy. If I had a book ready to publish right now, what I would do is make sure that cover is on point.
It is, and I'll echo something that's been out there a long time. But one of the best ways to kind of test if your cover is good enough, because I think it is hard to tell, especially if you're not plugged into the community, as like some people are. But again, I'm echoing this from past advice, but take your cover and put it up against every other cover in that genre. You can do a quick Google search and search whatever genre you're planning on. Say mine's epic fantasy. Look up, top trending, top 100 epic fantasy books on Amazon. You'll get a list of 100 books. You can take all of those images. You can even go to Goodreads, take those images, make yourself a little collage, put them side by side, put your cover in there, and make sure it fits in. Because when you're on the charts, when it comes to the point when your book's out there and you're actually on that chart, that's the first thing that somebody's going to see. If they happen to get on this bestsellers chart, they're still not looking at the blurb. They're still scrolling down the list and going, ooh, this cover. If you can just get them to your blurb, which is the next entry point, that's the second hook. But it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but it is really, it's the thing that draws people in. And especially if you're doing ads or, any sort of list services like email promotions or anything, they're just sending out a screenshot, like they're sending out a little digital photo of your cover, right?
Yeah. And it's not, I don't think that, often I find the gold at the end of what we just did and what I would call a tangent. And it is, I think, the coolest thing when, that's not a question of mine. That wasn't a question that we started with, but it was something you and I both found passionate enough to talk about. And I think that those are the coolest and most rewarding conversations, man. So thank you for
your wife.
What's that?
Let's thank your wife for that one. Eh? As along with everything else, but seriously, thank you,
Mama, if you're watching,
for appreciating that cover. That means a lot to me.
Yes, absolutely. So she's watching this, so she'll definitely chime in. But yeah, she dug it, man. And I'm glad that you brought that up. I forgot how we even got into it, but that was it, wasn't it? So, where are you hailing from? Where are you at right now?
I am in London, Ontario, Canada. So I'm basically right near Toronto. I'm right on the border, right near Detroit. I'm in between Detroit and Toronto. For Americans, Buffalo and Detroit.
Yeah,
essentially.
So I grew up in between Ohio and Michigan. Spent a lot of time in Detroit.
Right in the same biome, as we would call it. Probably seen the same types of trees, same fauna.
Yeah. I am a fan. Are you a fan of snow?
Oh, okay. I am. It's a love-hate relationship.
Sure.
As I'm getting older, I am finding that I am missing the summers more. I'm finding as a kid, it was not as bad because you're out there playing in the snow. But I mean, I'm playing with my kids and my child in the snow, but this winter was long. I was really feeling it. My wife and I have recently gotten into hiking. Since COVID, since 2020. We've just got into hiking. There's a lot of trails near us, which is one of the great parts about living in this part of the world. So we really miss that in the wintertime because it's just so bitingly cold.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty south as far as Canada's concerned. Like I'm right on the southern border of Canada. So
what's the coldest it gets where you're at?
Like this year we reach -30 with wind.
That's freaking cold, eh?
Yeah, no, it is. And then so again, the true Canadians are like, dude, we're -30 daily and we're looking at -45, -50. Like if you keep going north, it does get absolutely ridiculous. And the thing that really bites those, it's just so dry. It's just like your nose is like
your lips chap and bleed.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I just want I was craving green this year. I was actually like, my wife and I went for a walk early spring. No green. It was still a little bit of snow. And we're just like, where's the green? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
It's the middle of March.
I've had kind of the opposite. Like, I grew up between Wilmington, Ohio, and a place called Grayling, Michigan, which is way north of Detroit.
Okay.
And it's like average of 6 or 7 feet of snow quite frequently.
Yeah.
Things aren't canceled. Like school's still on every day.
Oh yeah.
it's normal. They're ready for it.
And you still get dinged for being late. Like,
yeah.
They're like, oh, figure it out, man.
Exactly. Well, you know, the snow plows are ready, you know. Here in Ohio, it's like we get an inch of snow and everybody's tripping out. You know, I've learned how to drive in the snow up north.
Yeah.
And, you know, people down here just don't know how to drive in the snow. They just don't.
Yeah. I think that really is. And there's a funny thing here that we all joke about, but everyone forgets. At the first snow, even here in Canada, everyone forgets how to drive in the snow.
Yeah.
There's all these accidents on those first few days. And
you see somebody slam on their brakes on a hill and you're just like, why are you intentionally wrecking your vehicle right now?
The thing that I find gets most people who are visiting is the bridges.
Oh, like, yeah.
You don't think that bridges just completely freeze over, right? Because it's just a piece of slab up in the air.
They're the first.
You know, so it's very, especially if it's over water. There's a lot of moisture there.
Yeah,
it's slick. So
are you now? I'm not the best with geography. So are you by any of the Great Lakes?
Yeah. So I'm right near, like, I'm basically in the land of lakes. Like I'm right near Superior. I'm right near Michigan. Lake Ontario is probably the closest, but Erie is also an hour away, like Lake Erie. So I'm right, like I can get to any one of them within 2 hours. Like Lake Superior, I think would be the farthest, but I can get there, like Sault Ste. Marie. So I'm again a few hours away. So there's actually a funny thing. There's this old rapper I used to listen to in high school, Classified.
I've heard of that.
He's great. If you're into hip hop, check him out. I don't listen to him too much anymore, but he's excellent. And he's got this one song, and it was something about being Canadian. But I swam. I've lived on many lands, and I've swam in many lakes. And I was like, that's basically what it's like to, I think, live in this part of the world. Is we've swam in many lakes. There's many big and small that are just all over. So you can find one pretty much anywhere.
I've swum in Lake Erie, but like Lake Michigan, dude, is just so freaking huge. If anybody gets a chance, it's not like the typical lake you come across and you go, try to see the other end. You will not. You'll believe that it's the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, I know. It's the size of small seas. Like if you go to the other side of the world and you just look up, like say the Caspian Sea, like it's bigger than that. So it's just not salt water; it's fresh water. So that's why it's classified a lake. But like that's why they needed to call it the Great Lakes, because we have full tankers on there. Like especially Quebec, St. Lawrence, that channel. It's a full on system, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. So I have to say, man, that was one of the coolest intros into talking about books ever, man. Thank you for kind of going on. Yeah, dude, you hit a lot of points that were nostalgic for me as a child. So
yeah, I've been feeling nostalgia a lot lately.
It's the best. It really is.
You're the same age as me, actually. You were born in 1990. I think I remember this last
November 14th, 1990.
Okay, so I was September 9th, 1990. So
dude, we're almost exactly the same age. Yeah,
we're missing that. The 90s, man, like the early 90s.
Like Saved by the Bell feels.
Exactly, yeah.
Dude, except see, the good Lord took my hair and blessed you with wonderful locks there.
Knock on wood. Thanks for that, yeah.
Well, so kind of dive in to the reason we're here, man. That was, I absolutely adored that, though, at the beginning. So I'm going to get to my question really quick, but we've got some wonderful people to shout out. Eddie Castro was here at 7. 43, talking about he couldn't wait to see this interview, and he has pre-ordered the novel. Timothy Wolf, hey everyone, happy Friday.
Hey,
we've got an Isaac Hill, part of the break-ins.
Isaac, buddy. Isaac's book's coming out May 14th, The Dragon Legion. Check it out.
I've got the ARC, and I'm in similar places in his as I am in yours, about halfway. And let me just tell you, man, what's going on with you debut fantasy authors knocking it out of the park, man. It's truly inspiring
Oh, thank you so
to start reading a debut novel from an author, man. And it's just particularly, I love your dialogue. You know, you start out in kind of like this cave, right? And there's some things happening. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it's just so easy to read and get lost in, man. And it was truly inspiring to start that, and uh, it really just blows my mind.
Oh, thank
So
you.
congrats, man. That's a lot of hard work paying off.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's so one thing I have been, I wasn't going to tell anybody, but I've been telling people that, like, I did write a couple books before this one.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, just some advice I'll lean into, like, to not rush. Like, I really knew, like, I wanted to put something out that I was really proud of. I wanted to put something on my shelf that I felt kind of belonged there. Um, and that's by my own standard, of course. But I was writing early on, and there's just so many things to learn and put together. And I think I had a couple of them, you know, and I just realized along the way, like, I needed help. So I not only wrote two novels, one wasn't finished, 80,000 words of an unfinished. And then I actually did finish one at 120,000 words before I even started A Memory of Song. And these were in the world of Ardura. So I was trying to work out this world, and like, just creating a world out of nothing is so hard, because you come out all these things as you're writing. You just come across so many different things. And that was the easiest way for me to build it, was to just get into writing it. So I think taking that big chunk of time to really figure out what I wanted, and then seeking professional help in a book coach, who actually was able to teach me, like I was a big reader, but I wasn't necessarily picking apart what I liked about a book. Like, I knew what books I liked, and I knew that, oh, I love George R. R. Martin's world building. I love Joe Abercrombie's, you know, his dialogue. But how do you do that? What are the tricks they're using? What are the things they're doing? So you're not just ripping off them, but actually putting it into their own voice.
Hmm.
As I started writing, I learned that they're using different tricks, right?
Sure.
And if you keep writing and you just write X hundreds of thousands of words, eventually your own voice starts to emerge. And you're just using the same tricks these guys are, but you
In
realize
your way.
it's all the same thing, because it's a new way. It's an original voice. It's coming from your head with your characters in your world. And as you get to learn all these tricks, you're like, holy crap, how do I put all of this into a book? And usually you finish a draft, and you can find points in the book where you've done certain things well. And what I really worked hard on was finding those points, and then layering them through the whole thing. And my wife uses an excellent metaphor of, we were just layering a cake the entire time.
Ooh.
So, you know, I built a small layer of cake. I needed to kind of go over it, add another layer, and then stack another layer of cake on it. And then at the end, we were just putting icing, and then we're putting sprinkles on top, and then we're putting candles. And so, you know,
Yeah.
you're just slowly layering everything in there.
So it does not ever take away, by the way. I kind of heard in your voice that you feel like just because you wrote a couple things before you published your first novel, man, this is your debut still. You took that initiative to say, you know what, I'm not going to publish this practice piece, this stepping stone.
Yeah.
That does not take away. This is your debut, man. So I think it's equally incredible. So I hope that you realize that, man. Like, I think that it takes somebody really big. I was talking to another guy on Instagram. I talk with him a lot about just kind of random book stuff. And he's writing a book, and he's been writing this book for like a decade. And he finally came to this point where he looked himself in the mirror. He just wasn't passionate about that project anymore. And he shut the door on it.
Yeah.
Not to say he won't go back to it in the future, but having that inner voice kind of guide you along, and your standards is what you said. Those are going to be the highest, right? So bravo for listening to that inner voice, and kind of, you know, as much as you probably wanted to publish and start a career in writing, you waited for the right time to do it, man.
Thank you very much. I did. And I actually, the funny thing you said that, because it was the right time, because I was always planning on querying and going the traditional route. I think many people who start writing, if you're not in the indie community, I think it's very common for young writers to have that dream of excuse me, of the getting the traditional publishing deal, the big Stephen King deal in the mail.
Right.
So like I was writing to please publishers. I was writing to please publishing houses. I knew what agents were looking for. And I was writing my own story, but I was holding back on world building. I was holding back on word count. I was holding back on all these different things that just the moment I decided to go indie, I didn't have to worry about anymore, right? And there's just all these different things that came into the factor at the right time. But it really was, I was actually writing my query letter. Like I actually had a query letter written, which I've saved, obviously. And I was just about to start sending them out. I was doing the research to get the right agents and everything. And right on that weekend, I can't remember the exact date, but Ryan Cahill released Of War and Ruin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the third book in his series. And that thing just took off. And I remember like I was communicating with Ryan in the early days when I was just starting out writing, when he released Of Blood and Fire. And I was like talking with this guy. And I remember him being like, just a completely normal writer. Like he felt not far removed from me at the time of talking with him before his publication. When I remember him being like posting, do you think that you should have this? Like putting on his thing, do you think that I should put "he bleeds like any man" on my blurb? Which is funny that like I remember that day, and now it just seems like you see that on his book, and it's like he was so confident, he probably knew from the start, like that was it. But he was just like everybody else.
Human.
And that realization, I was like, okay, so that guy started right where I am right now, and this book, his third book, is taking off. So I was like, okay, so what do I want here? Do I want to go down this long road of querying, where it's going to take potentially now, if I get an agent tomorrow, it would still take a year for us to get the book done. And then it would take many years for it to come out. So do I want to wait potentially 3 to 4 years to see my book on a shelf in my hands? Or do I want to publish this book and start on the next one right now? And the thought of that was so incredibly exciting to me because I had so much in this world that I wanted to do. And there's so much with this story and this whole thing that I created. I was like, I just could not hold back. And the thought of waiting, it was nothing to do with money or anything like that. It was just, I wanted to tell this story. My wife and I, we have both a background in many different arts. And I knew that with her help, we could make this thing like an incredible, we could put a brand together. We could do the whole thing that I had seen traditional houses do, traditional publishing houses do, but we would own it, Sorry, if you want to have a talk, man, I can totally wait.
Oh, nope. I was just, sometimes I have to make sure them kids ain't screaming, we're good. No, I'm absolutely caught up with what you're saying. I think that looking at a guy like Ryan Cahill and seeing that he is a human just like the rest of us, man. And using that as inspiration to do what you're doing is great. But continue, man. My bad on that.
No, that's okay. I mean, like I said, I totally understand. I'm lucky. I have one daughter. She just turned 2 in March, and
it's a beautiful thing.
Pretty like we're pretty lucky between 7:30, 8:30. So we're, like I said, it's excellent. And I don't know if we're gonna have another one. We'll get there when the time comes.
I've noticed that when I'm live, if I hear something, I'll do what you noticed, and I'm like, did I hear them screaming? Because if so, I've got to text the wife or something. So it's one of those on-screen normalities for me. So
I noticed, and actually this does come into writing. I'll bring it back to writing, but I want to tell you, I noticed when I became a father that everything changed. I was on extreme anxiety basically all the time, right? Mm-hmm. It was like having a deep sleep is much harder because you're like, is everything okay? You wake up in the morning, is everyone alive? Do I need to?
My wife is like, she's like, preach. Where's this?
So yeah, no, I totally understand. But anyways, this is, I think, it's very important if you're going to write a character who's a parent. I think parents will know.
Oh,
parents will know like this person doesn't have kids.
And another thing I've noticed as a man, now tell me if you've had a similar, like I knew women were strong. Yeah. But dude, like the creation of the woman was like, look, there's superheroes in our comic books, but look, they have nothing on what a woman can do. Like, and I remember hearing that like before having kids, and I'm like, they're just kind of, blowing smoke up their, they want to be on their wife's good side. No, dude, the
Yeah.
strength of a woman. If you've ever witnessed like birth, dude,
Yeah.
come on.
I said too. Yeah. 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 My wife impressed the doctors, actually. I'm not meaning to brag or anything, but the
No,
doc-
brag it up.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're a strong one. I was like, yeah.
It's something that is it's incredible. I always tell anybody, it's like, I'll never have the strength half of my wife, dude. It's just incredible.
Yeah, no, I think it really, and I'll tie this right into my book, but going through, I was writing my book as we had our child, and my character Wolfie would not be half of what she was if I did not go through that, because
Love that character.
I was like, I feel like I was able to, through nightly conversations with my wife, really like deep conversations, really understand what it felt like to be in her position at that time. At least I made a very valiant effort to try to understand what it felt like to just have had a child. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And which is really crazy when you're writing. You sometimes you need to go, like, you need to put yourself in this situation, and you need to actually feel like you're not just writing externally. You want to feel internally what your character's going through. And obviously sometimes that sets you up. You gotta put yourself through some stuff as a writer. So it's funny because when you're doing multiple drafts, and if you've written something that's like shocking or tough, if you put your characters through some stuff, every time you come back to it, it hurts. It's like, God, we got to do this again. But I think of it as the same way in real life when you go through things, and you feel adversity in real life, right? And you come out of that feeling better, you feel it stronger. This is a way to do it kind of safe. You're kind of safely going through the adversity of these really traumatic moments. And I think as a reader, it's obviously one thing, and as a writer, it's another thing. And you can experience both differently, but like really, really getting into those characters and becoming them, then you're setting yourself up for all the pain of the real world. You know what I mean?
What you're saying is the way that I truly fall into a novel is like when I can relate to that character, not in just a general sense, but they go through something traumatic that I've had similar feelings going through something traumatic in my life.
Yeah.
And that's when that spark hits, right?
Yeah.
Tell me if you've ever had this experience where you're reading a book and say you've went through this exact same scenario and it's been traumatic in your own life, and you're reading this as if it happened to you in real life, right? You've been through it. You almost grow, or I'll say I feel I grow a little bit seeing that situation from the outside, knowing the way that I felt was normal.
Yeah, it's you're growing empathy, and I think this is the greatest thing with readers, and this is why what I found. I just entered this community last October. I had been completely on the outside. I wasn't even looking in from the outside. I just came in and was like, Twitter, Instagram, books. How does this work?
Marketing necessities.
Figured it out. But what I realized very quickly was this community is so incredibly nice and so empathetic. And I think I pinpointed this pretty accurately, and I think you'll agree with me, is the reason is because as a reader, we are putting ourselves inside of all these people's heads. And like you just said, you're experiencing something traumatic through another person's eyes. So sometimes if you see that traumatic experience in real life, you can be like, listen, I know how this character dealt with that. This person's probably going through some shit. I can't understand. I don't know what they're going through, but I know that Tyrion Lannister went through this. Okay. So I totally understand what you're going through. I can empathize with you. Right.
Yes. And I have to give you an example of when I really so I knew the community was exactly as you just described it. Right. But it didn't hit as hard as it did this day. So there has not been one. There's been one. Now that I think of it, there one author that kind of shot me down. And mind you, I've talked to Raymond E. Feist. I've talked to Mark Lawrence. I've talked to Adrian Tchaikovsky, Christopher Rocchio, people that are household names.
Yeah.
And it was an indie author. I will never do that to anybody. I'll never name call. But what I'm saying is I reached out to a guy outside of this community who published a book, he was a prison guard. and I found his story very inspiring. And because he had written a book, I found kind of a leeway, a reason to speak with him.
Yep.
He was not having it. Not saying anything negative, of course, about him or that community that he's in, but it's not like the community you and I are speaking of. It's not.
Yeah, and you can kind of, I think of it as a small town. I've read a lot of Stephen King, so I always bring it back to the small towns. But if somebody enters a small town, and you don't know who they are, everyone's kind of looking at them like, who's this guy? What's he about to do? You know, and you can feel that as like, London is in between town, we kind of call it. So it's like about 400,000 people.
Okay.
It's not massive by any means, but it's not a small town either.
Sure.
Right? So I kind of have that in between feel, but there are points on the outskirts where you can feel, say like the small towns outside where I go and I walk into a gas station or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel people looking at me.
Yeah.
Like they're like, who is this guy? Where is he from? Mm-hmm. And then same thing, I work on the outskirts of town in a really small farming town. They don't even have a gas station in this place. And if I'm like out, like when we first moved there was locals coming around. They were looking at our building. They were like knocking on the door. Like it's really funny. Like they're really like, who is this person? Like, who are you? And that's like, again, a small community. They're all empathetic. They're really close knit with these people. They're not just in a big city. Sometimes you don't really need to know everybody. I mean, you can't know everybody. So when you're going through your day, sometimes you're walking through your store, you're not looking at people. You're looking straight ahead. You're doing your own thing. Where this is just a completely different feel in these small towns where they're going to the market and they're like, oh, hey, John, how's your son?
Yes.
Hey, Bill, I haven't seen you in a while.
You're speaking of my life, man, because I live in a small town. It's funny, too, because I just see my guy, Corey Ratliff. He grew up in a town like 20 minutes from me. And he went to school near my wife and everything. And that's how it is around here. It's a small okay, so Chillicothe, Ohio is where I live, and that's the capital. It was the first capital of Ohio. Obviously, now it's a small farming kind of community, but it's that same feel that you're describing. So I kind of had to bring that up because there's good and there's bad about it. Like sometimes when things happen that aren't necessarily the way that you want them to, everybody's going to know. But if you do something great, everybody's going to know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It goes both ways, like everything. I mean, you always have to be with the bad.
So I love that. So I loved hearing about this writing adventure so far, because I'm going to dig a little deeper with some questions here. And I like that you listened to yourself. You're honest with yourself. So my next question is, when and where did you find your love for literature? So were you young? Were you a little bit older like me? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, I love that question. I was a little bit older, actually. Like I think when I was young, I wanted to love fantasy.
Yeah.
I owned the fantasy books. I owned the first 3 Wheel of Time books. I owned all of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think any kid my age did, as the books. I owned these different books. I think the Sword of Shannara. Like I remember owning them and looking at them and being so intimidated and being like, I can't read. I want to get into this so bad, but it's so much easier to just watch Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, I mean, right.
So, I mean, I will admit, like, I definitely fell into more of the media side of things, but it was always medieval fantasy for me, even on that side of things. And then it wasn't until I was about 25. It was right. So my wife and I used to play in a band, and it was right around the time that our band kind of stopped. We went in between 2 bands, and there was an in-between point where we had a friend who worked at a Chapters, which is like Indigo Water, like a big bookstore. And he was like, you got to read Game of Thrones. You got to read A Song of Ice and Fire, blah, blah, blah. I think Game of Thrones season 5 had just come out. And he's like,
wow.
You got to read the books. You've got to read the books. I'm telling you. And he was like we were sitting around at my wife's house, her parents' house, sorry. And this was years ago before we were married. And I remember him telling us all the lore from the books of Game of Thrones that they left out of the show. Like, oh, this is why. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick these out. And I read all 5 of those in a row. And it took me about 5 or 6 months, but I wasn't really in fantasy community. I didn't know there was all these other books. But when I finished those, I knew right away. I was like, I need to find more. I need more, more, more. The first thing I went to was Wheel of Time because I had recognized it from a kid. And as I was reading that, I was like, hey, this is different than Game of Thrones. I love this, but like, what's more like Game of Thrones? And then I found Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah, dude.
You know, it just went down the line. I found Scott Lynch. I found all these different people. I just went nosedive straight into it, and I couldn't stop. So it was basically a slow process. And I think it really just kind of tail ended. And it wasn't until, like I said, that when the moment I finished the 5th, A Dance with Dragons, I was like, what's next? And that hasn't stopped. I mean, I think like so that first 6 months, I was like, well, I know I'm reading Game of Thrones. This is a pretty slow, blah, blah. But yeah, it's just been, and then I get obsessed with things. So once I go from fantasy, I went into the rest of classic literature. And yeah, I've just basically been down one big rabbit hole for the last 5 years.
It's fun though, right? I have to say, you know, a lot of our experience nowadays that we're both into it are the same, but the way that I had gotten into it was through kind of being laid up. I was like, you know, I can't take those physical adventures, and I took those fictional adventures. And I'm going to make a recommendation to you because, well, it was the very first fantasy book I ever read, and it wasn't the classic Wheel of Time. Now, I love Wheel of Time, but Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro.
I've seen this around.
My wife is not what you would call a fantasy reader, and she just finished it and she loved it. And that's been a long time. I've been working on her for a while. Like, hey, you might like this one. Tried it. Nope. I find the very first one that got me in the game, she enjoyed. So
I just wrote it down. Ordinary Monsters. It's funny because I've got, of course, you understand the whole TBR thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I just got a couple new big ones. This is How to Stop a Time War. I'm probably saying that wrong.
Dude, I got that one too.
Okay.
I just got it. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard so much cool stuff about it.
I know. It's one of those things. I don't know where it even came from. I just started hearing all this stuff about it. I need it. I need to read it.
Co-authored, and like I couldn't even really tell you what it's about, to be honest with you.
I know. I just know the premise was incredible. It was like two people fall in love from different futures.
And they like write to each other. It's just like journal entries throughout the whole book.
Yeah, epistolary. So the cool thing about epistolary style, the style where you're writing in letters, that was like very common in the Gothic, like Victorian era of like Dracula's written that way.
I need more of that, by the way.
And it lends itself to a dark feeling. Like letters leave so much left out. There's so much, like you're getting a lot, but you're not getting everything. And it leaves
that void.
There's a void. There is. Because there's the person that's writing the letter. There's the words on the page, right? And that's the character. But those are only the words on the page of a character. That's not the character. Like if you thought about it yourself, would you want to be defined by a letter that you wrote? That's not you, right? That's not your dial. Like it's really difficult to really get like you said, there's this once removed feel that just gives you like, it could be an unreliable narrator. They could be lying, you know?
And if you're that person, one of the two people writing letters to one another back then, let's say it's an extremely important topic. It's kind of like earth shattering. The kind of a lot of the important. I mean, you're getting one letter very infrequently.
Yeah.
The stress and the anxiety and the realization of how, like incredibly lucky we are, or kind of pampered to text a million messages just back and forth now.
It's unbelievable. Even like as parents, like I was thinking about this. You just used to go out, drop your kid, and then just go.
And trust. Yeah.
There's no, and then I'll be back at 4.
And you and I think, are the last generation to really experience that.
Yeah. I think like you're right. Like it was really a weird, like it's just crazy. It's almost unbelievable. It really is it's a different epoch of the world, you know?
Yeah, because now it's like I can't imagine dropping my kid off at the movie theater and trusting that they're going to be there 8:30 without me checking on them every 15 seconds.
No kidding. Yeah. Oh, the best thing.
That's how it was for me.
That's right. Yeah. Then the best thing about writing fantasy is when you're like, if you ever have two characters that need to meet somewhere, like meet me at the docks at sunrise on the 5th day. Like,
Yeah.
Gandalf, look for me on the 5th day at sunrise. It's like, that's really, you have to be like, just meet me here in like two fortnights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hang around this area and I'll be back.
The self-awareness, the awareness of time, the awareness of what's going on in the present moment is something that I feel like being alive in this time I'm missing out on. And I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to be present.
I think you're right, man. I think, and if we want to get deep on this, I think that's probably what's causing a lot of the anxiety in today's day. And I'm sure this is a common thread we've heard, but we're too plugged in, we're too available. And sometimes like you just need to, I'm actually just craving, like we were talking about earlier, going on those hikes. What I want to do is just leave my phone at home, know my daughter's at daycare or with grandma and grandpa or something, and just go to the woods for like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And just do nothing. And like, I can't even like, as a kid, I never thought that I'd be craving that. 'Cause I was just always out, always in
the norm.
And like, of course I played video games and like all that stuff, of course. And I'm not saying today's kids are removed, because I actually, like, I'm lucky enough. I have friends who have 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds, and their life is different, but it's not as different as, it's different because there's technology there, but they're still outside all the time.
Yeah, that's really important.
That is, I think, maybe it's obviously different in different families, but what I mean is the connection is obviously still there, with kids just wanting to go out. And when you get older, I think it's important to still get that feeling of going back out there. And it's funny because I'll try to tie this back into my writing, but when I do my best writing when I'm out. Like I often I wrote a lot of A Memory of Song just sitting in my backyard. It was last summer I was doing the whole icing on the cake. And that's when I really added, I think, the good stuff to this book. The stuff that is like, I think the heart of the book was added sitting outside after my daughter went to bed, at watching the sunrise from about 7:30 to 9:30. And that's when I would get the writing done, and being outside, hearing the sounds, feeling that it was like I was able to create a world. And like sometimes what I experienced this winter is I was struggling to be in a forest, to write about being immersed in a forest when it was the middle of winter. And I was like, obviously, of course I was remembering, and of course you get there eventually, but I think just, having that connection to always bring you back, to always bring it. And it comes back to that disconnect. Like we are so available all the time.
And by the way, I was never going to shy away from your novel. So we're going to get into it if you're good with that.
That's right.
Tell us about.
Okay.
No. So like I said at the beginning, dude, this is when I get the chance to talk about stuff like my childhood, because look, it has so much to do with what you're doing as a writer, and what I'm doing is wanting to write something. It's incredibly important. But I didn't want you to think I was going to skip over the meat and potatoes.
That's all right. No, I'm not thinking too hard about anything. Don't you worry.
Awesome. Yes, sir. I love that. You and me on the same wavelength. So tell us about a memory of song. Not too much, obviously.
Yeah.
But go over the genre. Go over the name of the series. How many books that you plan to have in it, and maybe a little bit of an overview of book one.
All right. Yeah. So this is the Last Ballad series, is what we're calling it. Obviously, A Memory of Song is the first verse, and I've kind of set it up where it's going to be the first verse of the last ballad, the second verse of the last ballad, third verse of the last ballad, and the final verse of the last ballad. Playing the last verse of the last ballad, but my editor would hate that with two lasts too close together, so it's going to be the final verse. So basically, the way that I set this up, and I started planning this in the middle of writing the first book. So I can't say that I had this grand plan from the start, but as I was writing the first book and I was trying to put stuff together, I realized that I was going to need basically I had so much world building to set forth that I figured the easiest way to do that would be to make a first book that was very standalone-ish. So that meaning there's tons of threads. Like it very much feels like the first in a series. Mm-hmm. And I always use this comparison is that there needed to be a Hunger Games. There needed to be the Hunger Games starts and the Hunger Games finishes at the end of
Sure.
that book. There needed to be a full story within this first one, but I also needed that story to completely explain the world building. So when I come in to the second, third, and fourth book, I don't need to spend as much time explaining the workings of the world. I'm kind of hoping that if the read through of this book, you're kind of in for it at this point, and you want to. How's it going, Biblio?
He likes the same character. That's my favorite character so far.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's funny because it's funny because she was written to be likable. Not likable in the sense like she's a hard, rough on the edges, but she was meant to be the heart, the one that you cling on to.
I feel it.
I wrote James, the other character. His personality he's kind of dull, and that's a kind of hard character decision to make when you've got a guy who's doesn't have a big personality, because I mean, it was obviously tough. He doesn't one of his things is he's not good with words. So he always says, I'm not good with words. He can't really articulate very well. So I needed to find other ways for him to get his feelings across. So it was a challenge, and I knew that it was going to drive people towards liking Wolfie more because she wears her heart on her sleeve, and you can very much grasp onto that and hold on.
But that contrast is special, though.
The contrast was definitely planned from the very start. They are 100% mirrored the whole way through. So when I originally wrote the book, I had 3 POVs, and the other character was down south further, and it was kind of showing you what was going on in these other places. Well, this main event, which the main event of the book, the kind of synopsis is there's dark magic, like an old order, an ancient order of warlocks has surfaced from the old world and has essentially destroyed or nulled the elements. So there's a spirit song magic system. So the spirits are tied in with the elements, and the spirits are dying. So the elements are dying. So there's no fire, there's no wind, there's no water, there's no rain. There's water, there's no rain. And obviously I had to research all this stuff. I made sure to get how long it would take a river to drain and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, wow.
They need to, how you would eat food and blah, blah, blah. But with this main event happening, it gave me something to a big cataclysmic event that kind of set the chain of events happening. So with this main event, like I said, you're tied up to these 2 characters up in the north, and that's where this main event's happening. So I chose to cut this third character out. And instead of showing you what's happening when the elements die, I chose to take this character and change it to the second book, where you're now going to see what's happening to him when the elements come back.
Okay.
But all of the horrible things that would have happened to a society if fire stopped, like if this actually happened to society, this has still happened to them. It's just now further ahead. But like it was way too muddled if I was going back and forth between the north and the south. So I basically told the story of James and Wolfie and left everyone else out. And what that kind of does, I think, in this first book is it gives you two main characters to grasp onto. So we've got this main story, and obviously I had to try to shape it so they're the 2 stars. And you've got the whole thing is serving them. But obviously, like this big event, them alone can't solve it. So I needed to make it bigger. But the easiest way I said to do that was to avoid a big dump of world building moving forward. I got all the world building kind of built in this first book. And because it's contained in the north, you're not jumping around. You're not confused. If I was jumping to different cultures, and because obviously these other places, they have completely different cultures.
Right.
You're going to feel like you're reading a completely different thing. And if you're trying to learn how this magic system works, and you're trying to learn, okay, wait a minute, who's this guy? What's this guy? It was way too confusing. It was way too dense for me to add more than 2 characters in the first book. And again, this came back to me having a writing coach. And as a writer, you want to be like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. He's like, Scott, I hate to tell you, but this is confusing. And like, it doesn't make sense. You've got to cut this character.
Was that hard?
It was incredibly hard. I had 55,000 words written of this character, and all the other characters played off of things that were happening. So I basically had to rewrite the book. It was the first 2/3. Luckily, this particular character I cut, I spent more time I'd written more of him than anything else, which is really funny to think because Wolfie and James became the stars. And at first they were kind of, I was grasping onto this other story more. But anyways, the whole thing with this first book, I like to look at it as kind of a big prologue.
Okay.
So like with fantasy series, how you would often see a prologue, which happens before, right? You've got that, but it's basically a whole story. It's a whole book that you can tie yourself up in. And then after, we've got the second verse of the last ballad, the third verse, the final verse. But in between each of the main books, I've opted to do novellas. And this is obviously a very indie thing. And again, this world that I built is so incredibly dense, and there's just so much that I want to give. But as I'm learning how to write, one of the biggest mistakes I think fantasy authors make is they try to give you everything. We have incredible imaginations, right? And one of the things that really hit me hard was a person said to me, listen, Scott, like children have good imaginations, but authors need to be able to control and take their imagination and turn it into a story.
Yeah.
A cohesive story, right? I was like, that's a really good point. Because I see a lot. It's like, oh, I have a great imagination. I'd be a good author. You probably would, but you still need discipline, right?
Dude.
So with that, I realized I could take the denseness of the world that I wanted to do and break it up. So like I said, I've got this prologue now where I've explained everything. Now I can go ham with the next 3 books. But I took these novellas as essentially my, episode 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars.
Okay.
The prelude, the original way back. So you've got a big event that happened like 3,000 years ago, right? So instead of just giving you, like in, again, my favorite book series, A Song of Ice and Fire, you'll learn about the Dark Night, like the long night, right? And you'll learn about it through stories, through folk tales and everything. And that's a style of its own that is just incredibly magic.
Love it.
And you love it. So I've given you those folk tales in the first book. But then I was like, how fun would it be to show you what actually happened and how the folk tales aren't reflecting the true events?
Yeah.
And how they kind of changed. And then that allowed me to make it so the person who survived this big event, imagine an elf-like wizard character who has a long life. The characters who survived this event, they can actually rewrite what happened and rewrite it in their favor. So they're not only kings or queens or emperors, but they're gods, right? And so that's kind of the premise I took. And you'll learn as you're reading these novellas, which are going to come out. So I have A Memory of Song coming out on May 29th. The Sound of Starfall is my first prelude novella. That is coming out end of June, end of July. In between, sorry, I shouldn't say end of June, early July, end of July. Sometime in the month of July, like I'm going to get the final proofread back end of June. And then I'm going to totally just send that out as soon as I can get it out. So we'll have your prelude novella and our first book, and that will kind of set up what happened 3,000 years ago. It'll set up the main antagonist from our first book, and then you'll get the whole first book, which kind of gives you a ton. So what I'm giving is a lot. Like I'm tried to make these first installments so I could have 9 months to a year to write the second book. There's a lot here. There's a lot to grasp onto. There's a lot to theorize over. There's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to get into. So the first book's 150,000 words, and the novella is 20,000. So you're getting nearly 200,000 words of stuff to start out.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with book 2 as soon as I can, which is shaping up to be about 220 to 250,000.
Nice chunker.
So it's going to just get bigger and bigger. But I felt it really important to find these 2 starting points. And obviously it gave me having those 2 entry points obviously goes on a whole other point of marketing, but having those 2 entry points gives you room as an author to make these next books bigger. Just because you know that if people have read both of these and they want to read the second one, they're going to want more. They want it to be bigger. If they're coming back, they liked what I did, they're not going to complain that it's bigger. Where if I had one book that was, off the start, really, really big, it doesn't always work. It's sometimes less approachable. So again, there was some thought behind it. But basically taking that character out of book 1, moving on to book 2 was very difficult, but I used the George R. R. Martin line when he had to cut a bunch of stuff from Dance of Dragons. And he's like, "Oh, it turns out I've already written 50,000 words of Winds of Winter." So I was like, "Oh, great. I've already written 55,000 words of Booktube." You know?
That's a good silver lining to find. And I have to say, and give a little bit of a remark on when I'm reading a book and that world, there's that mythology or those folk tales that are told through the generations.
Yeah.
And then you have these characters that kind of get to see the realistic part of those folk tales. They're going to be the same and they're going to be a little bit different at the same time. I find that very, very rewarding.
I thought that was so fun. And I think like the age we're in, we're getting to see a lot of science is able to tell us, oh, this is actually what really happened. These guys. Yeah. So there's a great story of in I can't remember. I'm going to say this wrong. I don't know if this was ancient Greece or ancient Rome. But anyways, there was a battle and there was an eclipse during this battle. The people at the time did not know what an eclipse was. So it just went dark midday for a couple minutes. So they all just stopped. They're like, "Yo, we're done." Like they're like, the gods told it. Like, this is a sign. Like
something bigger than us is going on here.
And it just threw them through an absolute loop. And could you just imagine that, right?
Yeah.
Explain the world. And I found that incredibly fascinating because we've got our definitions. But that's what we settled on. It wouldn't be settled on in my world of Ardura. Like, it would be different. It wouldn't be, they wouldn't believe the same things, right? Because, you know, how things develop. Even like when you look at, have you read Three Body Problem?
I'm like 25% done with it.
Okay, so you might get enough that they kind of go through these iterations of time. And these people keep getting different levels of tech.
And that's why I'm going slow through it. It's quite a novel.
But they always go down a different chain. Like, the tech is never the same. Like, you know, there's great theories. Like, we've gone down the mechanics chain where we're using leverage and that kind of thing. But there's very real evidence they could have used some sort of vibration. Like, I'm not going to get into, conspiracy theories about the pyramids, but they're like, you know, there's other ways. There's other technology chains that could have been achieved by that we just can't really understand because we never went that far down, right?
Yes. 100%.
And if you're into science fiction, I think you understand that. And I haven't read a ton of sci-fi, but I've read enough that I really like to mix. Like, I like to use sci-fi concepts.
We're in the same wavelength. I have not graduated from sci-fi university.
Yeah.
But what I have read, I've realized that is a genre I adore.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to. And if Aaron's still in here, I can't wait to get into Hyperion. It comes
so
high, and I'm just like, oh, this sounds like exactly what. But yeah, of course, like any other thing, finding time to read a book is so.
Especially if you're writing. Do you find that like reading during your writing times? Well, it kind of leads into my next question, which is, what's your writing process? But let's first answer this. Like,
yeah,
do you find like reading, especially something like Three Body Problem or Malazan or anything kind of dense like that, or Christopher Rocchio's prose, difficult during a writing period in time of your life, or do you kind of stray away from reading?
No, actually, so I'm lucky enough. My day job, I work in a factory, so I essentially do shipping and receiving. So I've got a lot of spare time, and I'm very lucky that my bosses are okay that I grab a paperback.
Oh wow, yeah.
I have headphones in, so my good reading time comes during the day at work. And again, that's a luxury that I am incredibly thankful for. Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to read so much.
Forklift driver?
And yeah, I do forklift. I do some press work.
Did it myself.
Great. We're cut from the same cloth, buddy.
Yeah.
So it's all. But that time to me is so incredibly valuable because there was a time that I wasn't super happy with. I was. And then I realized I was on my phone a lot. I was watching a lot of Netflix and YouTube and stuff when I was standing there at work, and I was like. Again, I was reading Song of Ice and Fire. I was like, one day I just picked it up. It was Clash of Kings. So I'm just gonna start reading this right here, right now.
Yeah.
Boss came back and kind of like, he's like, oh, what are you reading? Told him, he's like, yeah, I don't care if you read. Just if someone comes, put it down. I was like, yeah, okay,
incredible.
Great. So it was
incredible,
really good. And obviously, like some days I get more than others. But I really took that as kind of, okay, I wanted to be, my goal is to be an author. Like I would love to do this as a career. So I immediately took it very seriously. How do career authors do this? And obviously one of the main things is they've got a long, how can you write a book without reading a ton of books, right?
Yeah.
So I very quickly realized I was going to need to read books, but not just like any books, like all of the best of all time. So I got all those under my belt, and then I was started able to branch out. But that all leads into the writing process, which you asked. So the reading time, because I'm able to get these books read during the day. I'm often sitting there reading, and I'm getting just filled with inspiration. I'm just completely gushing. By the time I get, and I go after my daughter goes down around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I'll come down to my office down in the basement here, and I'll do an hour and a half to 2 hour every night. I do have like a word count goal. I try to get 1,000, but I'm not like, I used to beat myself up over it. But I found that actually just being chill allows me to get it done way easier. If
Love that.
I don't hate myself for not doing it.
That's a great tip.
A minimum of 500, because I think you can get 500 words even if they're bad. But I do subscribe to, I don't want to type 1,000 bad words. I can live with 100. I can live with 500 bad words if I just really need to hammer something out for a night. But I'm not going to keep going if I'm not feeling it. But now that I'm further along in the process, there's so many other things to do anyways, that if I'm not feeling writing and I get those 500 words, then I just go do one of the million other things an indie author has to do. But
Yeah.
for the most part, when I sit down, I'm completely gushing. And what I started doing as I became an author was to look at, as I'm reading, not just like blow through, but actually really pay attention to the cadence, really pay attention to the different parts. And like, so I highlight books. I just go like crazy with these things. I don't know if you can see this, but
Yeah.
but I just, like, my books are just completely filled with highlights, and it's me highlighting prose. It's me highlighting not really plot stuff, but technique stuff.
What do you use to mark your pages?
I do, people are going to hate me, but I do dog ears on the bottom corner here.
Okay.
See, so it's not at the top. I just finished Moby Dick last month, or this month. So this has so many dog ears, but you can see, like,
No, I think I'll designate books to do the dog ears too, because I've tried like the highlighter stickers and they peel the pages away.
Yeah, and I don't like the way those, like, I used to like the way those look. And I think I used to feel like a sense of satisfaction when I could look at that and see a book just all done up like that. But I don't like the way they look when they're on my shelf, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and I purposely buy cheap paperbacks to do this in. Like, I'm not really a hardback guy. I own a couple hardbacks, but and I have read them. The funny thing, I don't know how early, but I've got like one of the early of Blood and Fire from Ryan Cahill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not one of his first 50, but it's like one of the like really, really early ones.
Mm.
And I brought it to work and I read it. And then I brought it to home. I left it on the kitchen table. There's a cake stain on it. It was somebody's birthday. There's icing stain on it.
Yes, bro.
There's dirt stains. There's an ink stain on it. And I was like, if this thing's worth any money, mine's not. I've completely fucked this up. Oh, sorry.
Dude, oh no, you say whatever you like, man. Fuck is a totally acceptable word on my channel.
And so for that reason, when I look at the price of a hardback being more, I'm like, listen, these are for people. I appreciate that, but I'm not the one, because I'm the guy reading at work in a dirty warehouse, shoving the book in my pocket or shoving it on a dirty shelf at work, or I'm just reading it through. Sometimes I'll grab something that's full of dust at work, and my little dusty, and the sides of my books are a little dirty and a little beat up, but
adds character.
I love it. And I actually, to be honest, I love buying used books. Like, that's one of my favorite things. Some of my favorite books are used, and I have a version of Grapes of Wrath.
Oh yeah.
In 1968. So it's not like the original by any means, but this is an old book, and it's yellow and it's falling apart. And I love it so much. It smells like,
yes,
get a smell like that. That's 50 years of dust.
You don't get those smells anymore. I remember the library, like an old library smell. There's just something about it.
No, definitely. Yeah. So again, it's all back to when having that reading time during the day, it really helps, I think, clear So I'm not worried about, like you said, I'm sure like it's hard if you're reading a really dense book, it's going to be hard to turn around and go write your own book, right?
Yeah.
But if it's segmented, where like I'm looking at it as like, well, I'm at work all day anyways, so I've kind of just, you know, basically segmented my mind into two parts. There's three parts of the day. There's work, there's family time, and then there's writing time, right?
Mm.
So as long as I'm segmenting those times, the reading never interferes with my writing because it's always just writing time. I'm never feeling like, oh, I need to get some reading done. I feel guilty I haven't done any reading, which I know personally from just talking with the break-ins, especially many of the authors I know, they struggle because they want to read, but they need to read. And it's like, when do you do both, right? So I definitely know I'm in a luxury situation. And I even put my bosses in the acknowledgments of my book for this exact reason.
Oh, wow.
Because obviously, like, I don't think people, many people, when I say it, they don't really realize how much of an advantage it is. As an author to be able to, like, you know, so I can read like 150 pages in a day sometimes. So I'll get that. And obviously come home and do a little bit of writing. That's like just,
that's lucky
for an author.
There's, you know, I can't remember who it is, but I follow a few guys actually who, oh, I know who it is. Cameron from Nerd Book Review. He is in a tractor all day long doing compost. And just finds all of his time during work to audiobook binge.
Yeah. And books are great too. I commute to work. So it's like I got a 30-minute drive to work every day. And so there's an hour of an audiobook every day. And
so as an author, if you can find that time that's given to you, whether it's at work or well, especially at work, you know, take advantage of it. Don't be doom scrolling, which I do, of course.
Yeah, we're all guilty of it sometimes, but I think, like, especially if you want to do anything professionally, you've got to make that the focus. And I've just seen, like, obviously so many authors have different goals with their writing and what they're trying to accomplish, right? Obviously so many of us would love to do this full time. We would love to be full-time authors and make our income and support our families doing this. The harsh reality is that's very difficult. Like we were just talking about how hard it is to even read all the books we want to read. Someone could want to read your book and they're still not reading it. They could really want to read it.
When I talked to Ryan is the first time I got a little bit of a pushback or a different perspective on what you just said. And that's how much you wish you could do this full time, which I still think is the goal.
Yeah.
Regardless of what I'm about to say, I still think that he knows this is the goal and this is what he's lucky to do. And he loves it. But with creating a very popular series and quitting your day job and creating a series in which people look forward to reading and now pays his bills, there's a tremendous amount, and I could see it on his face. I could see it just in his shoulders, the way he was, he is incredibly stressed out sometimes, I'm sure, because of the amount of weight that is put on his writing. That's his career now.
Yeah, and it comes back, and I know Ryan has said this, and I resonated with it because I've had this same exact feeling. My wife and I used to do music, so I know if you take a hobby, something that you love doing, and turn that into a career, you're in for a serious wake-up call. You're really gonna feel like, I used to love this, and when you're in a band, you're like, I used to love this song. Now I'm playing this song every night 100 times. And I'm completely sick of this. I do not want to play this song, but here I am, playing this song again. And that's what it is when you're a writer. We get this excellent escape, especially the first book is so romantic. It's like writing a book. It's amazing. I'm really into it. Ooh, and it's this incredible feeling, right? And very quickly, that feeling is replaced by, I need to get these words done because I've got bills.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I'm not close with Ryan, but I don't know if I don't think he has kids. And
no, he doesn't.
That would be like, I could imagine if he wants to have kids, he's probably
I think he does.
He's like, oh my God, I need to, like, you know what I mean? Like that, like as a father, you could be like, how can I just do, like, you gotta be making smart decisions. You've got to be really, you know, making sure that if you're gonna do this, you're doing everything that you can possibly do.
Yeah.
And you're learning everything. And the most important thing that I've found is never ever think that you know what you're doing. The
Oh
second
yeah.
that you're like, I know what I'm doing, and you get comfortable,
Yes.
that's when you fall into ego.
Dude, satisfaction is where you start to decay.
It is, and it's all comes back. You got to kill the ego, right?
Mm.
There's a serious ego inside all of us, and it's just human nature. And the first step, I think, to being a professional artist, to being a professional anything, at a very high level, is realizing there's something bigger than you. Whatever you believe in, religiously, spiritually, whatever, there's something that you are not it.
Yeah.
There is a higher power here. If you've written a novel, anybody who's written a novel can attest with what I'm about to say, is that there's something like you feel guilty being like, I wrote that whole thing. There's some magic happening, man. And that sounds
Yeah.
like woofy doofy,
No, it doesn't.
magical. But I'm telling you, like, there's the muses, when they talk about the muses, these are a real thing.
Sure.
Sometimes ideas just come to writers and you're like, where did that come from? And people
Yeah.
are like, you planned this. And I was like, it just came out of the blue. And I got a great example of that to stem off of this. When I was writing my book, I wrote that first chapter with Wolfie, and I knew because James was being hunted, I needed Wolfie to be hunting. So
Oh yeah.
and everything James is doing is mirrored by Wolfie. So they're always opposites, right? And that's just one of the rules of storytelling, compelling storytelling. So anyways, she shot this deer, and this person came running through the woods holding the deer on their shoulders. And in my head, I was like, wait, I wrote it and I was like, wait a minute, you couldn't pick up a deer. Like, a guy couldn't just pick up a deer and run through the woods with it. And I was like, oh, this is a giant. But then the person started talking and I was like, oh, this is a baby giant. Right? So it's just kind of like, I never thought, people were like, how did you come up with a baby giant? I love that. It's so original. And I was like, well, I don't think it's original. Nothing's original. But I also didn't come up with that. That came to me. I was gifted that and I took it. And there's different things like that. And
not everything needs an explanation.
They don't. There's just things that happen. And I had this talk with somebody else. There is, like, you don't, if you're trying to explain, sometimes when you're writing fantasy, especially, you want to bring up some ties that never get tied off. You want to bring up some loose ends that are just, people are asking questions. You don't necessarily want these to be big things.
Sure.
Little tiny
curiosities.
Yeah, like what was in that hole? There was something in there 2,000 years ago, and now I see eyes.
Yeah.
Well, move on. Like, what was that? What was it living underground?
You'll forever wonder.
And there was a Name of the Wind, which obviously very controversial series.
Yeah.
But there's some parts in there that I remember reading it, and the book is just so phenomenal. But then when he's underground and he's describing being underground, I'm like, is that a Ferris wheel?
Dude.
Ferris wheel? Like, what is this? And then all I wanted to do reading the whole book, I was like, I want him to go back underground. Tell me what's under there, right? And you're just waiting for that. And
there's just like so many mysterious parts where like he leaves a lot of those open things that I don't think that people notice or really like recognize at first.
Yeah.
And I haven't made it all the way through the book. I got the 10th year anniversary, and I'm like 3/4 away, and I'm already like I understand why this is a popular book.
Yeah.
But I also understand, like, to have a incredibly popular book, especially one that's been as popular as that one, and for as long as it has, there are some things that are questioned. And that might be the key, right? Just
no, it is, because
constant mystery.
Because life is a mystery. You don't go through life understanding everything. And if if you did, that would be some kind of hell. That
it would.
Because you would be looking at everybody who doesn't understand everything and be like, what is wrong with you? Don't you understand?
Having the answers to everything, folks, is like my biggest nightmare.
Yeah,
I like to have the knowledge that I need in my life or pursue it. But at the same time, if I had the answer to everything, I don't know how much inspiration I would have at this moment.
That's so great. I have a friend who, anytime I ask him for advice, okay, I'm expecting him to just give me an answer. I'm just like, I have this problem. Tell me what
Mhm.
to do. And he doesn't ever tell me what to do. He goes, starts asking me questions. Like, tell me, how would this make you feel if this happened? What if this outcome occurred? But he starts asking me all these questions. I'm like, why don't you just tell me what to do? And then as he asks another question, I'm like, you've just made me answer. Like, you've given me all the answers. They were
Yeah,
inside of me all along. It was that Master Miyogi, or one of those moments where they're just like, I felt really like, oh my God. Like, he just showed me I had the answer the whole time.
yeah,
But you're looking out and you're like, you're trying to, hey, tell me what to do. Please tell me what to do. That's all everybody is doing. That's all
sure.
everybody is doing. Everybody's just like, please tell me what to do. Please tell me what to do. Looking to somebody, right?
It's like the least person that you'll trust is yourself. When in the end, like that's the best bet, is to trust yourself. Because who else is going to get you out of a bind, or who else is going to give you that inspiration that you've learned over time, that's unique to you. And
Yeah.
you know I don't know how much sense that makes, but I think having that connection to the uniqueness, uh, the way that I interpret a book is not the way you're going to interpret a book exactly.
Yeah.
There may be some commonalities, sure, but everybody's unique for a reason. And I think taking that and embracing it, and really making it your own, especially if you want to be a writer, or even in a creative way, if you want to review a book or just kind of interpret it yourself in your own head, I think that's very special to hold on to and not get rid of.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
especially.
so, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on the second book, but it's like, because I'm so caught up in the publishing of book one,
Mhm.
it's been really tough to get back. So like, all I'm trying to do is get back to the moment when I can just dig into book two, because I'm really far along. Like I said, I had 50,000 words of one character, and I've reshuffled. I've deleted a lot, so it's like more like 20 now.
Mhm.
But then I've got a whole 35,000 words of these new characters that I'm writing. So as book two is expanding, everything is kind of falling into place for these next books. So I'm doing outlines, and I'm keeping everything organized. But the harsh reality right now is, because I'm doing A Memory of Song, and I'm also doing The Sound of Starfall coming out
Mhm.
together. It's been edits, it's been marketing. I'm a debut author, so to build the platform to launch a book is an immense thing. It is very
I'll
difficult.
bet.
This is the whole basis of what the Break-ins was formed, as a support group for us authors to make this platform to succeed. Because it's setting up a website, it's setting up a mailing list, it's actively marketing, and there's just a whole whack of things that you've got to do, and it's endless, and you're always learning. And so, because it's just this process, there's my list of things that I have to do is 100 things long. So every night when I get my little bit of writing time, I'm coming down, I'm crossing things off the list, I'm getting my Amazon book page perfect, I'm making talking with other authors about different things promotion wise. And then once I get everything set up, it's not a lot of time, not a lot of brain power left to really dive into book two. So I'm
Sure.
just in the process of taking the advice that I've got from other authors of making sure that this first one really goes smooth. Um, so I'm always picking away at book two. I'm not in my process of 1,000 words a day yet, but I've got all these little things. I have so much stuff built up. I've got the outline of all the characters that when I actually get the time to sit down and start plugging away at it, I'm gonna like really start making some progress. But it was all from A Memory of Song. I had 3 lines, so I've done line edits, copy edits, and proofread.
Oh
Um,
wow.
those kind of just come right in a row. And then as soon as I got the proofread back for A Memory of Song, I sent The Sound of Starfall out for its proofread. So for its line edits. So my line edits are due back next week. And I spent this week, essentially, I got a little bit of writing done this week, but I basically spent the whole week making sure my Amazon book page was good. So there's like A+ content editorial reviews and everything. So I was going through, doing all the due diligence, making my mailing list look really nice, making sure all the back matter was good. It was the SPIFBO entry today. So I was frantically reading through my EPUB file.
Did you get in?
I don't know if I'm one of the 300 yet, but I'm entered in the draw.
Okay.
I was worried because my book comes out May 29th. Obviously the thing was today. So I remember hearing about it like in October, like last year, and being like, oh my God, I don't know. It's going to be so close. If I have my EPUB file ready by May 10th, I can enter, because the book doesn't have to be published until June 1st, but you need the file. I needed to submit the whole book. So luckily my editor got the proofread back like just last week. So I finished it up, got it all polished up, sent out the final thing, loaded it up to Amazon, sent it in. So luckily we just snuck in, but yeah, there she is.
It looks beautiful, man. I looked at it before I put this up because
so I have some stuff that's pending. So you'll be able to see, go to like Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. And I based my thing off of this. So if you look at his page and you scroll down, and a ton of the big indies have this as well. Like we saw Corey in here. I know Corey has this as well. It's just it's again, we as indies, we want to make sure that we're inseparable from tradition. So go down, scroll down, and you'll see, like, if you keep going down, you'll see some like A+ content. So this stuff, and then keep going down. Mm-hmm. So see this right here, these pictures.
Yeah.
So this is what I did this week. So I got this set up for my book on my Amazon page, but it doesn't load right away. So that's why you didn't see it there yet, because I literally just sent it in 2 days ago. So sometimes they take Amazon's pretty slow with things, but basically setting it up like that. So I've got editorial reviews below because we sent out our arcs. So we got some reviews from some of the nice blogs.
That's awesome, dude. And you know that you're doing what man, he started out doing, like, it's not something that just comes overnight. So doing that is incredible, dude. And I think that it's very, I've talked to, a lot of people that are kind of doing the same thing as you, as far as setting up their page. And I love the fact that you're putting the extra something in it. You're looking at who is successful, what did they do? And I'm going to try to do my own thing through what I am influenced by.
I think that is, again, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. This age that we're in, we have just an immense amount of literature, an immense amount of media that we can pull from, we just have so much. We're so rich with, again, we have a thesaurus. Like, I can just go on Google and use it as a thesaurus as I'm writing. And that used to be a real problem. Like, writers really had to think hard about using different words. Like, we're very lucky that we can just be like 20 words for angry.
Yeah.
And I can just, change it up. Like, my editor was like, everyone in your world is nodding at each other a lot. They're always nodding. Like, he nodded. So as I was going through editing, I was just like, do they really need to be shaking? Like, everyone's just always like,
right.
It's like they're the bobblehead world. Right?
And those are those little, like, nuances that, as a guy that hasn't published a book, they would never have thought of. And I'm guessing that was a similar experience for you. You didn't know until you knew.
Yeah, you don't know exactly 100%. And even when you're reading your own work, it's tough to. But I was always trying to hold my work next. Again, reading all day at work, reading these good books, trying to hold my work up to that. Did I live up to this today? Mm-hmm. Most days it was no. 99% of the time, I did not live up to what I read that day. Mm-hmm. But I think 1% of the time I did. And if you string enough of those together, if you just keep going, eventually you'll produce something of a pretty high level. And again, it comes back to just you can write a character who's far smarter than you, right? Mm. So I look at it as the same way. Like, when I read Da Vinci Code, and I heard Dan Brown, the author in the Masterclass series, he was talking about how when he wrote his character, this guy who was so much smarter than himself, it took a little while, but it's not that hard, because you actually only need to do your draft, you go through, but then you have time where this guy, the reason he's smart is because he can make these decisions in a split second, right? But it didn't take the author. The author got the chance to go and research, type it. It didn't take the author a split second to come up with this genius idea.
Right.
What makes genius is that you're able to react and you're able to analyze a situation and react to it very quickly in a obviously efficient manner, right?
I love that.
For taking that kind of thing, I was just like, yeah, you're never going to live up to, you know, the genius of a work every day. But the author whose work you're reading, they didn't either. Right? And that's, I think, important to remember, that what you're reading is something that the author has poured over. And yeah, there's a lot of natural talent in there. But really, it's a lot of it, like any other craft, any other job, it's just hard work.
We all bleed. Same color, dude. Yes, exactly.
And you can really, truly learn how to do anything. And I've always had that. Like, I've gone through my life learning all these different skills. And I used to always think of myself as like a jack of all trades kind of thing. I was always interested in learning different things, right? It was like, oh, thanks, EL. I appreciate that, buddy.
He's a good guy.
It was like, you know, I just lost my train of thought, but I appreciate that, EL.
Oh yeah, no, I do that all the time, man. That's my favorite thing to do, is lose my train of thought. It's so easy when you're in your 30s, right?
I'll tell you what, though, as I've been writing, I have found my ability to go on a tangent and then bring it back to the beginning.
You've done well at that. Yes, you have.
That's gotten better. But as an author, you have to. Like, so you can go on a 2,000 word tangent as long as you bring it back.
I like that, man. So I've never asked this question before, and I kind of just came up with it as I was writing yours down, and it kind of is deep seated, and I'm kind of surprised I've never asked it, but I'm going to ask you for the first time. How can I, as a reviewer, do a better job for you?
Oh, wow. Well, I'll definitely start by saying reviewers are incredible. The work that you guys do, you people do, is just amazing. To just, it's like the most ultimate kind of public service. You're not only serving the author, you're not only serving yourself by getting your thoughts out, but you're serving a community of people by making it easier for them to find a book that they might resonate with, right? So I appreciate that. I want to start by saying that.
Oh, of course, man.
But as a reviewer, like, I think the thing, as I've gotten a few reviews for a memory song, a memory of thong, I just said, that's a whole other book.
That's a different genre. It's a little spicier.
The thing that I've resonated with, I think, that the reviews that I've read that have really kind of you know, stuck with me as the author, is when the reader is picking up the things in between the words, like when a reviewer can kind of pick up on something, say, like, it's not completely literal. Like, not everything that we type is literal, obviously, but if a reviewer gets a feeling across, like, kind of, oh, this is what he was going for, or like I had a person say, this is not grimdark because it never enters the level of I can't remember the exact word, but it's not nihilism. It never enters nihilistic territory. And I was writing my book and I was like, okay, this is dark. I don't want to market this as grimdark because I read a lot of grimdark, and this doesn't have the essence of grimdark. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more of like it's a dark story, sure, but it's not hopeless. Exactly. And that, like what you just said there, is kind of, as we were looking in between the lines of what was really trying to figure out, what was the author trying to accomplish? Because I can tell you, most authors are trying to do something more than just a sentence level. We're thinking on the big picture. Like, we're not thinking that
I thought I was wrong by that. When I started doing written reviews for like FanFi Addict and now for Before We Go blog, I thought I was wrong, and I needed like incredibly, like an incredible step up, because that's what I do in my written reviews. I don't go into like analytics as far as tropes and like grammar to a point where it seems almost like a textbook. I go into how I felt during the book.
That's the best,
dude, and that's what I've heard. So that makes me feel much better about it.
No, that is the best, because we're like, the author's not trying to, like, obviously I'm trying to direct you towards having certain feelings. but like how you react to those feelings, that's you. I can't tell you how you react to this thing I've presented you, right?
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing as an author is seeing how people react to these different things. Just because like it might not be what you intended, and it might be something really beautiful. You might be like, I didn't intend that. I can't believe you got that out of this, and that is just really cool. Because like again, so it's like this weird thing when with this book, what I'm experiencing right at this moment is I've made this public a few months ago. So I've gotten to sharing. I'm used to sharing the book by now. Sending out to the ARC readers was the first big step of like, oh wow, I'm actually sharing this to a big chunk of people.
That's a big step too.
Pretty scary. But because of that, it kind of gears you up. You know, I haven't got a 1-star review yet, but we got a 2-star review, and that was like, okay, this is good. I want to get these out of the way early because like I need to practice this feeling. As like, you know, when we're getting our first reviews, it's hard not to read them, obviously, right? But
sure,
you really need to practice, and exactly what EL just said. Every reader comes to a book differently, and this might not be the book for them. It's not a shot at you. I mean, some people will take a shot at you.
Sure.
But
Those are obvious.
That comes from a place of hurt. That's so much beyond you. And again, it comes back to killing the ego, because when you can just kind of kill your ego and be like, listen, this person's not really mad at me writing. They're not like, they're obviously upset at their life and where they are. And this was
evident too.
To offload this negative feeling. And because like, you know, I think most people, when they don't like something, they just kind of put it off to the side and you kind of move on. Right. So again, you've got to practicing dealing with that early on. I think that was great. Because it was, again, it's just part of it. It's part of life.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to like you. And there's actually this really interesting thing. I listened to this thing called the Daily Stoic. And
yeah, dude, I've definitely listened to that.
So he said, Ryan Holiday is the guy's name. Ryan Holiday said this excellent thing when he was talking with Tim Ferriss about how you just, when you're putting yourself out there in public, you're automatically setting yourself up for haters, right? So for every person that's a fan of yours, you probably have 2 people that don't like you.
For sure.
So putting yourself out there, as soon as you realize that's the reality, if you realize that pretty quickly, that's good. But what he said was that Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor of, you know, ancient times,
right?
He probably had more people that, like, in his entire empire. Sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling with that word. There's more people in his empire, right? At that time, let's say like 1 million people. So what Ryan Holiday was saying, I think he's got like 10 million people on his mailing list or something. So I probably have more people that hate me than there were in the entire Roman empire at the time of Marcus Aurelius.
Which is a crazy thought, right?
That's an incredible thought to think of. There's probably just more people that on earth that hate him than there was even alive. We definitely live in a time where you've got to have a certain hard skin to that, especially the internet.
Yeah, the internet, what it does is give people the balls to say what they want and have no repercussions for it. Like nobody's getting slapped in the teeth.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's these keyboard warriors that I just cannot, dude. That's a whole nother thing. But like, bro, like how can you be cool with your manhood or womanhood or whatever your essence of being an honest person if you find it within your soul to completely try to destroy somebody through a keyboard in which you'll have no consequences?
Oh yeah. And like it's funny because you can, like, as humans, we can really be hurt, you know?
Yeah.
Like in a comment can really, like, I look at it, I don't know who this initially came up with this concept, but I always look at like brain power. There's like a certain amount, it's like a battery, and I've got a certain amount of battery power every day, right? And I've got to reserve a certain amount of that for writing at the end of the day, because if I go through my whole day and I'm dealing with this and this and this, I get to sit down at the keyboard and there's nothing left to write, right? So as I'm going through my day, I'm like, do I need to get involved in this? If I get in this argument, this is going to take up battery power from my brain that I could just use later. And I tend to just kind of go through life kind of not worrying about stuff. And
that's the best way.
It's all, again, it all serves writing. It's all like selfish, but it's like, you know, I think that I see many people will really go in and they'll spend all their battery power on this thing.
This negative energy that's
Right.
not gonna, like, whether you prove this person right or wrong, like, it doesn't matter from your perspective.
Yeah, no, that's what it is, and it's perspective. And then the other funny thing too is that it all comes back to ego because like, why do you think that like anyone cares what you think?
Ego. Yeah.
Like, I mean, when I'm doing a book review, and this is probably very much the same for you, when I'm writing a book review on Goodreads, it's for me to get my thoughts out.
Yeah.
I'm not actually writing it for the author.
Yeah.
Like I'm writing it for myself as like I need to journal what I just read so I don't forget it because I don't want to read all these books and then forget everything I read.
100%. Yeah. And oftentimes, like, I'm not even, like, most of the time, 99%, I would say, I'm not even thinking about the author. It's literally a chance for me to feel in the moment like I'm somewhat intelligent, right? And
Yeah.
deciphering my thoughts. It even comes down to, everything we do has a selfish point to it. And I even see it in book reviews. Like, I'm not a egotistical, selfish person in the majority, but there are things that I do that absolutely represent me as a human, and we are self-serving. Um, but I think coming into the community has also opened my eyes to, like, um, I love books and I love talking about books, but I also want people who read my reviews to gain the experience I had.
Yeah.
Um, Depending on whether it's at the beginning of the book or the end of the book, it just depends on the book, really.
Yeah. No, you're right. And that's when I'm actually writing my reviews, I like to take quotes out of the book
Mm-hmm.
to kind of try to stencil out the different feelings I had. So if you take the quotes and you kind of put a quote, this was near the beginning, type a bit about that quote, it kind of frames in the whole review. And like,
Exactly.
there's a great thing. I can't remember who said this. I think it was Marcel Proust, but how you art criticism is something that it really takes a lot of intelligence
Mm.
to criticize art, and how you do it really says a lot about who you are as a person. And you'll see very common threads throughout history of the most intelligent people that have ever lived. If you look at their critiques on art, you'll find that it's very like you just said, it's there. It's not. It's self-serving. How did this
Yeah.
make me feel? Because they look at again, it's art criticism. It's going to tell if you're just yelling, I hate this. You should not read this. It says, okay, this person's controlling,
Yeah.
angry. This person, it can tell you so much about.
Little unstable.
If you're just like, this is beautiful, it makes me feel love, and I feel light, and I feel like I'm floating when I watch it. Like that's like, okay, this person's like they're really thinking about themselves. They're doing some introspective work here.
And no matter how bad a book is that I've ever read, there are points that I'll make that I like represented and felt like whether I completely hated a book, there will never not be a moment in that review where I'm like, but as much as I didn't like this book, I related with this, or I related with this.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives you the thought process too. It's like, is this person here to tear everything apart, or are they there to find the silver lining? Not even the silver lining, but just the good and the bad.
Yeah, like you said, and even I've seen some bad negative reviews, I should say, not bad, but negative reviews that are, it's not even negative, I guess, but lower starred, I should say.
Yeah.
And again, reviewers are very much like, listen, this was not a bad book. This is not the book for me, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not what I liked, but like somebody else might really like this. Like I'm
Yeah.
not saying don't read this. I personally didn't like it.
Ithra, you said that perfectly. I'm terrible with reviews since I find no, that's not terrible. That's exactly who I am. I find something good about everything, which is weird. It's not weird since I'm so bitter. If I have a hard time believing, I've gotten to know you a little bit that you're bitter. I have a hard time believing that. Come on now, you're pretty awesome. But I can relate. It's like even if I hate the book, there's going to be parts. It's hard to find a book so bad that you can't relate to
Yeah.
something.
Well, it's
Just
like
show that.
it's like I think most authors are trying to put well, naturally, I mean, if the book's written by a human, there's going to be a piece of a
Or
human.
human.
Yeah, there's going to be a piece of that human in there, whether it's good or bad, or like you
Yes.
said, even if someone wrote 99% bad, there's probably 1% that's really hit something on the
Yeah.
head. You know?
If you don't find it, you're not really looking. You're not there for the right reason. That's my opinion. Of course, that's my opinion. But
Yeah,
so man, Scott, I have to say, dude, I don't often talk to people for an hour and 46 minutes.
that's how long it's been.
Dude, it's been an hour and 46 minutes. It's incredible when I have such a I usually have natural conversations, but I don't have this much of a natural conversation. So I want to say, man, as two fathers, uh, I really appreciate the insight and the tenacity and the openness to kind of share everything that you've went through. And this will not be the last time I ask you on my show for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it again for sure.
Dude. So Scott Palmer, what remind everybody the release date of A Memory of Song.
Yeah, so A Memory of Song is coming out May 29th. Of 2024 this month, just like less than 3 weeks away. Wow. And then The Sound of Starfall is coming out shortly after, which you can receive for free if you sign up for my mailing list at scottpalmerauthor.com/mailing list.
So I have all the links in the description.
And I want to say too, thank you for the kind words you wrote in your description. It was just blown. It's awesome. It's very humbling to be described in that manner. So I really do appreciate that.
Of course, man. Of course, dude. It's just me being honest. So on the realest level. So Scott, I really look up to what you're doing, how you're doing it, and look forward to being a part of what you're going to do. So again, man, thank you for letting me hang out with you for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's incredible when I get to look back at the time and realize how long we've talked. And for you guys that were here live chatting, I know I didn't get to most of the context in the chat area. I did pay attention. I hope I didn't miss too many wonderful questions. I did notice that there was a lot of context between one another. If you do have a question that I missed, send it to me and I'll send it to Scott, or I'm sure he's quite the gentleman. I'm sure he wouldn't mind a question or two in his inbox either.
No, I'm always open for that, especially like I've been trying to make a community space. So I'm trying to put a Discord together. Well, I have it together. I'm going to throw some people in it. So definitely open to community space. Ask me anything you want, anything about the book, especially. And yeah, I'm always here.
When you get that Discord together, throw me an invite. I'll be a member in an instant, my friend. So
that's amazing. I appreciate that.
Scott Palmer, my guy, thank you so much. For y'all that were here live, thank you so much. For you guys that will watch in the future on replay, thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow. Let's see, what's today? I have to say, this is funny. I do this all the time. I'm going to say the YouTube stuff real quick because I forget who I talk to next.
Yeah.
Like, share, subscribe. That helps me and helps the authors I speak with exponentially. I will announce on Twitter and my Discord and anywhere else that I am. Probably Instagram too, who I talk with next. But until then, have a wonderful night, day, morning, wherever you're at, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.